Our water committee organized this event, and it is a joint committee of both leagues. Both Rita Sudman and Ann Omstead have been core members of the Joint Water Committee, and they will moderate the questions in the Q&A segment of our webinar after the speakers have made their presentations. I would now like to turn over to Rita Sudman, who is both a league member, but who also was executive director of the Water Education Foundation for 34 years. Rita.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. And when I did leave the foundation, come back to San Diego, the first thing I found was the League of Women Voters because, I want to tell everyone that's tuning in, maybe you all know, some of you are new, but the League does fantastic work. And I was surprised at how many people research these issues. So please support the League and consider being a member. So I want to give you a little background before we have our great speakers. So as you may know, the Colorado River is one of the most dramatic and the most tapped rivers in the world. The river sustains 40 million people, 30 Native American tribes, irrigates nearly 5.5 million acres of farmland, and supplies more than 4,000 megawatts of clean hydroelectric power. It runs 1,400 miles from up in the Rocky Mountains to the Gulf of California. Its mighty flows carved the Grand Canyon, and the Colorado River Basin spans 7 states. The Upper Basin states you'll be hearing about are Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. And the Lower Basin states are Arizona, Nevada, and California. Now, this cartoon by Steve Breen, a great cartoonist, the thin blue line, I call it, and historically and to today, this is what we fight over, the shrinking Colorado River. The line is getting thinner. So the entire basin, though, is rich in natural beauty and biodiversity. And the system is highly engineered with an extensive network of dams, as most of the people actually live outside the basin. Water is delivered to big cities such as Denver, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Tijuana. Agriculture uses about 70% of the water in the river and behind the dams. The biggest reservoirs are Lake Powell in the Upper Basin and Lake Mead at Hoover Dam in the Lower Basin. A group of government agencies manages the river, including state agencies and the federal government. Now, this is dividing the Colorado River. The Colorado River is, again, the most fought over and the most regulated river in the United States. The country's first interstate compact dividing the river was agreed to in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1922, when 7 basin states agreed to set up a group of rules to govern the river. Now, Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover brought the states together, and there's lots of stories about how he locked them down in a room, etc., but he got the deal done. Now, the needs of Mexico and the Native Americans were not included in this equation because, frankly, it was 1922, and that's just a sign of the times. We're dealing with that now. Thus began the rule of the law of the river. The original agreement overestimated the amount of water in the river, and climate change has decreased the available water even more. This old agreement requires significant water be released from the Upper Basin to the Lower Basin states and also to Mexico as a later deal over a 10-year period. Now, in my experience as a water journalist, the states strongly fight over water, all the way to the precipice. They're making an agreement, it's not going to be done, and then suddenly it is. But this year could be different. Now in 2026, the states must agree to a new plan, a new set of rules on how to manage the river in the future. And this comes amid one of the driest winters in decades. The negotiations are setting a dangerous precipice. Yes, it's a stalemate right now. They've already blown past a February 14th deadline that was set by the federal government. Now, if the states cannot agree to a plan to conserve and manage the system, the feds will do it for them. They'll enforce water cuts, and it won't be pretty, and there could be decades of court fighting. The draft EIR the Bureau of Reclamation has released has as its potential option the idea that every state will lose significant amounts of water. In the lower basin, California could be cut by a third, and maybe twice that amount for Arizona and Nevada. Colorado in the Upper Basin is a key state in the negotiations and holds half the basin's apportionment of the river water, and Colorado wants to hold on to that water. Now, where are we in the negotiations today? The final answer to that question is a matter of great importance to 40 million people. And here in San Diego, we get two-thirds of our water, up to two-thirds of our water from the Colorado River. Tonight, we have a panel of representatives of the lower basin states and some reporting on the positions of the upper basin states. They will help us to understand the options and the possibilities of our Colorado River future. Now, I need to note that because of time issues and because of the audiences mainly from San Diego and Southern California, there is a heavier emphasis on the lower basin. We have three panelists from the lower basin, two from California and one from Arizona, and one panelist representing the upper basin. We will hear from each of these panelists, and then, as you know, you'll have time for your questions at the end of the presentations. Now it falls to our first panelist to summarize positions of the Upper Basin. Alex Hager has the tough duty to explain to the audience the thinking of the Upper Basin states. Now, Alex is currently a public radio reporter at KJZZ in Phoenix, but he previously covered water in the Upper Basin for public radio stations in Colorado, and he certainly keeps up with his Colorado River sources in the Upper Basin. His work has often been featured on national NPR programs, and he is the 2025 recipient of the Water Journalism Award from the Water Education Foundation. And incidentally, I just have to say that the foundation is a wonderful, respected source of free and low-cost information for folks. So if you want maps, documentaries, briefings, tours, and I said free information, go to watereducation.org. Okay, end of plug. Alex, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Rita. And what Rita also failed to mention is that the journalism award I was given is the Rita Sudman Journalism Award. So it was a pleasure to meet her back then, and I'm grateful for the recognition. So I will make it abundantly clear out of the gate that I do not work for any of the states in the Upper Basin. I do not represent them, nor do I necessarily share their beliefs. You're going to hear later from some folks who represent entities in California and Arizona, and I'm not one of them. I've just spent a lot of time reporting on both. I spent the last 6 years of my career in Colorado and very recently moved to my new home in Phoenix. So Rita gave you a great primer on where we're at with the Colorado River. But the most important thing to know right now is that we have a math problem. It's a supply and demand equation that is out of whack. There is not as much water in the river as there used to be. We know that that is principally because of climate change. Yet we are still using, in many cases, as much water as we were when there was more water in the river. So supply has gone down significantly. Demand has not changed accordingly. So the big question in negotiations right now is what can we do about that demand side? For the most part, we cannot meaningfully make a lot more water. You'll hear maybe a little bit about ways that we can make a little bit more water, but all of the work is going to be done on the demand side. The significant majority of it is going to be how much do we use on farms and in cities and in manufacturing all across the Western US. This is a basin that stretches from Wyoming to Mexico. I've had the privilege of reporting from all 7 of those states, as well as the country of Mexico, talking to people to get their perspectives about why water is important in each of those places. So before we hear from some folks in the lower basin, why don't we hear about some folks who are in the top half of the river system? So right now, the big disagreement is over who should have to feel the pain of those reductions. There is agreement among the states that there will be pain from reductions. Those reductions are necessary, but who exactly is going to have to cut back is the heart of the question here. So I'm going to do my best to characterize this Upper Basin position, and know that the other panelists are far more plugged into these negotiations because oftentimes they're on the inside of these big conversations. So I know that I'm going to get corrected on a couple points here, but I'll do my best. So the states in the Upper Basin right now are basically saying we feel that the Lower Basin should have to take not only the majority, but perhaps even all of the reductions going forward. And the reason that that's the case is twofold. One is sort of a philosophy, and the other is a quirk of a 100-year-old legal agreement. So right now, at this point in negotiations, there have been a number of opportunities for the states to say, look, we have come up with an agreement on how we can all use less water. All of the people watching this from the sidelines have said that that is entirely necessary, have said that each of the 7 states needs to give up some water. But the Upper Basin states have more or less said, we are not going to have mandatory permanent reductions going forward. And the reason is that they say they already feel the pain of reductions because of where they are in the river system. The majority of the Colorado River that gets used from Wyoming to San Diego on city streets in Denver and farm fields in interior Southern California by rafters and skiers and birds and fish all along the way. The majority of that water starts as snow in the Upper Basin, in the mountains of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. The way the river's managed, though, is to basically take that pool of water that's created by the snow and spread it out a little more evenly. Because of that, it means that the Upper Basin states have to deliver a required amount of water to their Lower Basin counterparts every year, regardless of whether it's been a booming wet year where the slopes are full of snow, the rivers are rushing, or whether it's been a year with not so much water, like we've seen this year. If you've been following reporting or seeing pictures, it is brown ski slopes and craggy rocks sticking out where there should be snow. So the Upper Basin states say, look, we're not going to sign up for new permanent reductions to a water supply that is variable every year. Their point that they're trying to make is that they have to take reductions at the hands of Mother Nature every year it doesn't snow a lot. And because they have to deliver that set amount of water to their downstream counterparts every year, they feel the difference between what Mother Nature provides and what they have to send down every year. So that is a major point of where we're stuck in negotiations right now. We have seen the Lower Basin states come forth with a proposal for some cuts to water use. I think there are onlookers who would say that those cuts need to be even deeper, but they have said, we're going to volunteer some reductions to our water use, and we'd like our counterparts to do the same. For over a year now, we have seen those counterparts basically not volunteer new reductions on the grounds that they are already taking reductions at the hands of Mother Nature. That's where we're stuck. The reason that those states are digging in their heels seems to be that they think they can prove their point in court. So the whole system of the Colorado River and the laws that govern it go back more than a century. The foundational document of the Colorado River is an agreement called the Colorado River Compact. It was signed in 1922 between those 7 states. And like we said earlier, it generally excludes the 30 tribes that are in the Colorado River Basin and the country of Mexico, despite the fact that they are very much party to water use. And that agreement is very particular with its language. And the Upper Basin states are leaning hard into those particularities right now. Basically, the idea that they have to deliver a set amount of water every year is worded a very certain way. And the document from 1922 says that the Upper Basin states shall not deplete the amount of water flowing from the Upper Basin to the Lower Basin beyond a certain amount. The Upper Basin is saying, we're not the ones depleting that water. It's not because of our use. Mother Nature is the one depleting that water. Mother Nature is the one putting less into the system. And even though we have this legal obligation to deliver a certain amount of water, it's not our fault that we have less to send. So right now, that is where negotiations stand, is that for the better part of a year, we have basically been at a stalemate. The negotiators in those rooms have not budged much from their original positions. And I will not try to summarize too much of what they're saying because we have one of those negotiators speaking later on the panel. But for the most part, from the outside looking in, those negotiations have been stuck at those two original points of contention. And so the question is, how do we have a path forward when the consensus around the region, from farm groups, from environmentalists, from city leaders, is that we have to reduce use somehow? How do we move forward when the people inside those negotiation rooms are not able to do the thing that everyone says they have to? And the question right now is, can the Upper Basin volunteer the kind of cuts that the Lower Basin would agree to? Can the Lower Basin move forward with a plan that, basically goes forward with the we're not taking any cuts stance that the Upper Basin seems to be digging in its heels on? Or is another party going to have to come in and settle this for them? So right now, it seems like we are ticking closer and closer to that other party coming in and settling it for them. Like Rita said, the federal government ultimately is the one that manages this water system. It pulls the levers at Glen Canyon Dam in northern Arizona, at Hoover Dam in Nevada. And basically, if the states can't come to an agreement, the federal government will impose its own system for managing the water, and it's likely to be very unpopular. We are on course right now for a big legal fight that would likely end up in the Supreme Court. Almost everyone you talk to says that that is a bad idea, including, I think, all of the negotiators themselves. But so far, we have not seen those negotiators steer off of that course because they are stuck on those two opposing philosophies. So I look forward to answering some more questions about this. I really look forward to hearing what some of the people who actually make these decisions have to say. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a picture of where we're at based on the stance of the Upper Basin states.
Alex, I asked you to do a lot by summarizing the positions of the people you were covering, and you really delivered. I appreciate it. I think you made it understandable to our public. And now we're going to jump down into the Lower Basin, get to that nitty-gritty. So our second panelist, we're going to start with A for Arizona. Arizona's Colorado River Programs Manager for the Central Arizona Project is Vinitha Kartha. With a background in planning and water management and 20 years of experience, she is part of Arizona's negotiating team on the river. Now, the Central Arizona Project brings water from the Colorado River to Phoenix, Tucson, and tribal and agricultural areas. Arizona gets almost half its water from the Colorado River, so it's a big deal. The Central Arizona Project is a junior water rights user on the river. Frankly, that means that California holds the stronger water rights. We've got the cards. So, Vita, take it away.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you, Jane. And I think, Rita, you did a fantastic job walking through and providing a comprehensive introduction. And Alex, I truly appreciate how you were crisp with your overview of the Upper Basin. So I would like to share some slides, please, because given this is a different state, it would be nice to have some visual. I'm a visual thinker, and that's what I plan to do with you all. Hopefully you can see my slides.
Yes.
In a slideshow. Great. And a very warm evening from Arizona. It's really hot here. We just got off the 100-degree weather today. It is 25 degrees more than normal. Alex probably knows this better than I because I probably hear him reporting. Welcome, and thank you very much for this opportunity to present our story to the California, especially in San Diego, one of the places that I visit quite a bit. My name is Vinitha Kartha, and I serve as the Colorado River Programs Manager with the Central Arizona Project. So Colorado River supplies are extremely important to the state of Arizona. We have 4 distinct water supplies as our sources, and Colorado River forms almost 40% of that supplies, followed by groundwater, which is almost equivalent. It's 41%, followed by in-state rivers, forming about 18% of our supply. And these are salt and wordy rivers. They are very, very much very much a seasonal flowing system. It's not water sources like Colorado is. And then we also have an up and coming source, which is the reclaimed water. It used to be 3% about 10 years ago. It has slowly gone up to 5% given the conditions of our water supplies across the basin. So I'm going to be talking about the light blue section of this pie chart, which is Colorado River supplies. So the state of Arizona has a total of 2.8 million acre feet allocation. Rita talked about Colorado itself, who has 4.28 million acre feet. California has 4.4 million acre feet of allocation. The state of Arizona has 2.8, Nevada has 300,000, and Mexico has 1.5. So of Arizona's 2.8, 1.1 million acre feet is used on the river, primarily by agricultural communities as well as a few tribes. When I say agricultural communities alongside California's producing regions, we also, together with California, form the winter bowl of the country. This is where you get your vegetables and lettuce from. In addition to that, there is the Colorado Indian tribe who holds the highest priority right, perhaps, on the river, which also is on river in the state of Arizona, right between Bullhead City and Lake House, a city right there, as you can see. And also we have cities like the city of Yuma, Bullhead City, Lake House City. So it is a lifeline for all of the communities that are along the river that has no other source of supply other than the Colorado River. Anything that is not used on the river, the Central Arizona Project gets to do it. We do have 1.4 million acre feet of contracted rights on the river, allocated rights. And in addition to that 1.5, we get to do it whatever is not used on the river. In an average year, we get to deliver about 1.7, or we get to divert about 1.7 million acre feet of CAP water to our southern and central Arizona communities. It is really important to the state of Arizona to have the CAP water come into central and southern because more than 80% of the population live within the service area of CAP. There are about 3 counties within our service area: Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima. Actually, I should say those counties, parts of those counties are within the CAP service area. We also serve 11 tribal nations. There are 30 tribes in the entire basin. 22 of them are in the state of Arizona. 11 of those tribes are within the CAP service area. We like to say that CAP is the largest supplier of water to tribal nations in the country, perhaps in the world as well. We are also allocated by contract. We serve 54% of that 1.7 in an average year to municipal and industrial entities, and 46% of our water goes to tribal entities. Until 2022, we were directly serving agricultural entities within central Arizona. But since 2022, we have not served any water to those agricultural users unless there are some cities that might be allowing those agricultural users to store that water so they have the ability to use that water in lieu of using groundwater, because we do live in the desert Southwest and these are water stressed areas. So that's our service area. I talked about the tribes in the basin, 30 tribes, 22 in Arizona, 11 of them served by CAP. This is our priority system. So when we have reductions on the river, when we have shortages, as Rita pointed out, the Central Arizona Project does have junior priority status on the river. And when that reduction is implemented, it goes directly to CAP. In other words, CAP takes a brunt of reductions in the lower basin. And if you live in the lower part of this bar chart, if you are in that red color, the priority 3, which is a small portion, which is 68,000 acre feet, it is shared by tribes and a few cities. If you're in that P3 location, you may not be impacted until the reductions are extraordinarily deep. Right above that is the Indian priority and the M&I. When I say M&I, I mean municipalities and industries. Think the city of Phoenix, city of Tucson, Chandler, Scottsdale, a lot of pipes that are going to actual homes. On the Indian priority sides, we are serving to tribal lands that are growing indigenous crops as well as for their own homeland use. Also, the tribes get revenue from that water by leasing some of their water rights to the M&I into the lighter blue chart. So if there are reductions, not only are the tribal homeland entities impacted, but a lot of the cities that receive water from the tribes as leases also get impacted. Right above that in the yellow is the non-Indian agriculture, which is owned by 2 tribes and a few cities. And right above that is ag pool and then excess pool. So if you look at the reductions, we have been in a state of reductions in the lower basin from the past 5 years. And in 2022, as well as through the years between 24 through 2026, including this year, we have been in a tier 1 reduction. That is when mead is projected to be below elevation 1075, the lower basin is in a tier 1 reduction. In those cases, in a tier 1 reduction, our reduction is 512,000 acre feet in the state of Arizona to the state of Arizona, most of which, all of which comes to the Central Arizona Project. Those reductions have impacted all of those agricultural supplies. We haven't provided any supplies to those agricultural users, as well as those 2 tribes and several cities have not received water under those tier 1 reductions. In addition, in 2023, we had a tier 2A reduction, which was when mead was projected to be below elevation 1050. In this case, the entire NIA pool, those 2 tribes and cities, got completely wiped out, in addition to the ag pool and some of the other users that would usually receive excess water. So this is a block chart, but you have to remember, these are actual homes, these are actual people, these are actual lands that are getting impacted. In addition to that, so the reduction that I showed you is depicted in the dark purple on this chart at the bottom. And in addition to that, we have been voluntarily conserving water in Lake Mead, trying to prop up Lake Mead from falling into critical elevations. I believe Alex said it very well. It is demand that needs to be managed. We cannot control drought, but we can control our consumptive use. In the lower basin states, we have been very much aware of this fact, and we, in the lower basin, across the board, have taken actions to reduce our consumptive use. Our consumptive use was the lowest since 1983, back in 2023. We have continued to reduce our uses. As you can see, not only do we have mandatory reductions, but we have also voluntarily conserved water since 2014. Within Arizona, just by ourselves, we have conserved almost 5.5 million acre feet in Lake Mead. This is helping us going to dead pool and also preventing us from getting into really bad reductions. This has caused a lot of issues, large-scale land following. It's been very hard for a lot of the communities to prove assured water supply. If you have a home in the state of Arizona within the active management areas, you have to prove, you have to have an assured water supply certificate, essentially proving technical, legal, physical availability of water supply for the next 100 years. And given the reductions that you saw, a lot of those communities no longer can use that NIA supply to prove their assured water supply. And of course, increased groundwater pumping, there's been a lot of on-farm and county-wide economic impact. And we, in the lower basin, had produced a 760,000 acre feet reduction to Arizona. And together between Mexico, California, Nevada, and Arizona, we had proposed a 1.5 million acre feet reduction going forward pretty much most of the time. In those cases, CAP's cuts go much deeper and start to get into that Indian and Amani priority pool. Going forward, I want to quickly talk about the DEIS. Rita talked about DEIS. This was an environmental impact statement, which was published in January. There were a few alternatives, and I wanted to show you in orange is the reductions to our total allocations, which includes Mexico. So imagine that as a reduction to the 9 million acre feet. So under no action, which is a second bar chart, under no action, there's a 7% reduction to the entire lower basin, including Mexico. Of that 33% go to CAP. Let me take your attention to basic coordination, which is a third chart. And there is a 16% reduction to the entire lower basin, and 77% of that goes to CAP. That's because it's based on priority. If you look at maximum operational flexibility, 44% reduction to the lower basin, 98% of that go to CAP. In contrast, if you look at those red arrows, Upper Basin has no mandatory reductions, absolutely none. And I also want to show you the impacts to CAP. So if you look at the The third bar chart from the bottom under the maximum operational flexibility, if this were to be implemented in the deepest reductions, CAP would get 24,000 acre feet of supply. It is a wake-up call for us. Under the basic coordination, which is the fifth chart from fifth bar from the bottom, CAP would get about 237,000 acre feet in the deepest shortage. Imagine this is just the deepest mandatory reductions. In addition to this, there might be dead pool shortages implemented. So when you're looking at these sort of scenarios, nobody is safe. Not even California, not even the Colorado Indian tribe that has some highest rights on the river. Because to protect meat from going into dead pool, there are additional reductions. So not only is CAP wiped out, but probably a lot of the other entities in the lower basin. You have to remember our lower basin is the economic engine in the entire Colorado River Basin. 70% of the population lives here, 70% of the economic productivity is here, 70% of the agricultural productivity is also in the lower basin. So it's extremely important for us to help save that. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to Rita.
Thank you. You've certainly painted a dire picture with a nice smile on your face. Arizona really is facing, I think you've made it really clear, Vinta, how Arizona is facing significant cuts, being a junior water rights holder. And I know for the public, it's a little hard, this junior, senior, why can't we just, times have changed. Central Arizona Project was set up for agriculture in the old days. It doesn't even serve that anymore. But water rights are like brought down from Abraham and the Ten Commandments, and it's something we have to live with or find a way to go around, and we'll talk about that. And that leads us to the next speaker of California with those strong water rights. Our next speaker is chairman of the Colorado River Board of California, and it's J.B. Hamby. He's a student of water history, and he comes from a long time farming family in the Imperial Valley. He is a board member of the Imperial Irrigation District. That is California's largest water user and holder of one of the oldest water rights on the Colorado River. Now, California uses more Colorado River water than any other state. JB?
Thank you very much, Rita, for the invitation and your very nice intro. I'm going to walk through at a high level California's stake in the Colorado River. As Rita mentioned, California has some of the strongest, largest, most protected rights on the river. We don't sit on our laurels in California. And as you'll hear from Dan Denham in a moment, you'll see many of the things that we've done throughout California to live within our rights and continue to step up and do more. I'll start off here by talking about how California does Colorado River work. We're an enormous state. We have half of the population of the basin, as Rita mentioned, the plurality of the agricultural production throughout the basin. And we have a lot of large and important stakeholders in California that collectively collaborate and have to cooperate to guide how we participate in these interstate discussions. Since 1937, that's been the role of the Colorado River Board of California. It was formed by the state legislature and is ingrained in state law as the agency charged with protecting California's rights and interests for our Colorado River water and power resources. We have a 10-member board. It's inclusive of 3 agricultural agencies, the Imperial Irrigation District, Palo Verde Irrigation District, and the Coachella Valley Water District. 3 urban entities, San Diego County Water Authority, the Los Angeles Department of Water Power, and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We have 2 state members as well, appointed by the governor, and that's from the Department of Water Resources and Fish and Wildlife, as well as 2 at-large public members, one of which is now former president of the Fort Yuma Quetzal Indian tribe, Jordan Joaquin, who makes California unique in this regard of having, and helped to start the trend in some ways in the past few years, of having direct tribal participation in our Colorado River affairs and management. And somewhat different also about how California represents ourselves on Colorado River issues. You may hear different phrases used in the media about the seven people who are involved in these Colorado River negotiations and talks. Each state has a representative that dates back to 1922, when each state appointed a commissioner to have it on this Colorado River Compact Commission to negotiate the compact. Each of the states has generally a governor-appointed representative. In the case of in Nevada, it's a little bit different. It's the general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. And in California, we have the Colorado River Board that sort of serves, in a sense, as like an electoral college and elects from its membership a chair who serves at the direction of the board and is charged with representing California's rights and interests on the river, and has that responsibility of doing the work of operating in this messy democracy sometimes we have in California, but one in which all of our unique interests, the depth and breadth of them, are represented at the interstate level and with our federal, and then also our partners in Mexico. As mentioned, 19 million people depend on Colorado River water in California. That's half of the population of the Colorado River Basin. It's also half of the population of the state. We have 600,000 acres of year-round agricultural production, which I'll walk through in a moment where that is, located throughout Southern California, and then also $2 trillion of economic productivity. As Vinitha mentioned, 75% of the agricultural production is in the lower basin. The same figure applies with economic productivity. As we all know, California, depends on the day or week or year, is the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world, and half of that economy is fueled by Colorado River water. I'll take you on a little bit of a tour here through Southern California and our Colorado River rights, interests, and users. Starting here in the purple area there on the Colorado River itself, which is the Palo Verde Irrigation District. They enjoy some of the first appropriative rights on the lower Colorado River with a priority date of 1877. There's about 105,000 acres of farmland in the Palo Verde Valley, producing forage, vegetable, and fruit crops, including in the summertime some great Palo Verde Valley cantaloupe and honeydew melons. Down here in the farthest southeastern corner of our state is the Fort Yuma-Quezon Indian Tribe and the Barred Water District. The Barred Water District is actually nested within the boundaries of the Fort Yuma-Quezon Indian Tribe, which is the second largest tribe in California. But the Barred Water District actually partners and works with the tribe to provide water service operating the canals to provide water to half of the irrigated acreage of this of the Barred Valley there. About half of it is in the Indian unit, so that's within the tribal reservation, and the other half is within what's called the Barred unit. Lots of vegetables, leafy greens, that sort of thing in the wintertime, dates in other months of the year as well. Then we have, just to the east of you all here, who are covered up under this nice leafy green picture of the Imperial Valley in the lower corner there, covering up San Diego, is your neighbors just to your east along Interstate 8, the Imperial Irrigation District, with a quantified right of 3.1 million acre feet a year, serving just under 500,000 acres of year-round forage, vegetable, fruit crops, growing everything from A to Z, asparagus to zucchini. It's the largest irrigation district in the country, and also generating large-scale conservation for the benefit of users within California, and more recently for the benefit of Lake Mead as part of some near-term conservation efforts to protect the system through 2026, the end of the current rules. My number there, 7.2 million acre feet of conservation since 2003, is a little outdated. It's actually now over 9 million acre feet of water has been conserved on farm through system improvements and other efforts to conserve water within the Imperial Valley in partnership with federal and then in-state partners like the San Diego County Water Authority to keep California either within its Colorado River entitlement or to make additional water available to protect and benefit Lake Mead. A little further northwest is the Coachella Valley Water District, basically everything east of Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley, from Palm Springs to the Salton Sea. Around 330,000 acre feet a year is consumed in the Coachella Valley, serving on the eastern side of the valley is 63,000 acres of dates, vegetables, fruit, turf crops. Bell peppers are a really big deal among dates and lemons and other things. And then the west side of the Coachella Valley is good at growing houses, tennis gardens, and other fun resort type activities that you can enjoy year round, as people do. And then we have along the coast here the small urban water agency that takes water from the Colorado River Aqueduct, also down the State Water Project, and serves half the population of our state. That is the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, with 26 member agencies, the San Diego County Water Authority included among them. It's the largest urban water provider in the United States. Metropolitan has a basic apportionment under California's 4.4 to 550,000 acre feet a year of water from the Colorado River, which is supplemented under some long-term agreements within California with an additional up to 590,000 acre feet a year of additional supply potential in partnership with the aforementioned other agencies and users in California, with conservation, forbearance, fallowing, exchange, and other transfer programs. Just a little note, it's been mentioned before, but this is foundational to all the other elements of what we call the law of the river that manages and governs this stream shared by 7 states in the US and 2 more in Mexico. And that's the 1922 Compact. You'll often hear the way the compact is divided up, and the basic premise is each basin gets 7.5 million acre feet a year, so the same to those 3 lower basin states that consume or are generating 75% of the ag, 75% of the economy, and then the other 50% goes to the other quarter within the upper basin states. Not quite exactly the way it works in the practical reality of what the compact lays out. And I'll get to that in a moment as well. The way the compact provides it, at least in my and Vinitha's mind as well, I think I can safely say, is that the compact requires the upper basin not to cause the flow at Leaf Ferry to go below 75 million acre feet over any 10-year period. So that's 7.5 million acre feet a year on average. And then unless there's surplus in the Colorado River Basin, which we certainly don't feel there is right now, each basin is responsible for bearing half of the responsibility to deliver to Mexico, who, for all intents and purposes, has the highest priority right on the Colorado River, and that amounts to 750,000 acre feet a year. So in our mind, the basic premise is the upper basin is responsible for delivering 8.25 million acre feet a year. That's what's on paper in 1922, but it's now 2026. We have current rules that are operating the river. They're expiring very shortly here at the end of this year. We need rules to operate the river next year and beyond, but we also have a really bad problem where the hydrology, the snowpack is really horrible this year, and there's some near-term actions that need to take place to protect the system in the near term. But we ultimately are trying to look to solving the river's problems for the next 20 years and beyond. These are the main key issues for California. We want to resolve what's been an outstanding long-term supply-demand imbalance in Lake Mead, bring that back into balance. And we collectively decided we think between lower basin states and Mexico, cutting our uses by 1.5 million acre feet a year. For context, that's the amount of water Mexico uses on an annual basis, just for context, or 5 times the amount that Nevada uses in a year. We believe that doing 1.5 million acre feet a year starts to recover system storage in the basin. We break even and then start to replenish depleted storage within Lake Mead in particular. But beyond that point, our belief is that both basins and both countries need to be able to contribute for solutions beyond 1.5 million acre feet. While I mentioned previously, our basic compact rights entitle us as the lower basin in Mexico to assure that there's 8.25 million acre feet a year, no matter how wet or dry it is in the Colorado River Basin. That's what the upper basin is responsible for delivering. We're also aware of the practical challenges and the long-term consequences of climate change, and we ultimately have benefited over the last number of decades in the Colorado River Basin by having shared agreements where instead of having legal disputes, that we instead come up with operational rules that make sense and sustainably operate the system. We also need to figure out what deliveries of water look like from the Upper Basin to Lower Basin in Mexico, how that water gets released out of Glen Canyon Dam, as well as reservoirs upstream of that. And important to California specifically is being able to use this tool called Intentionally Created Surplus, ICS for short. But what it is in a nutshell is the ability to conserve water, bank that water in Lake Mead, store that water that benefits the system, and ultimately to deliver that water sometime later when you need it, or to make that as a contribution to the system when the system needs it. So those are a few things for us in California. I appreciate your time. Very eager for questions, and I'll turn it back to Rita.
Thank you. It's obvious now to our viewers that IID and the agricultural interests down there are sitting on a heck of a lot more water than the urbans ever got when the deal was made. But I want to say that in the last 20 years or so, I've seen IID and now under younger leadership do a tremendous amount of conservation and progress to diversify, to use their supply and to save water. And the deal with San Diego, which we will get into with San Diego gets water from the Imperial Irrigation District, and our next speaker will talk about that. So thank you again, JB. Okay, so our last speaker is Dan Denham. He's general manager of the San Diego County Water Authority, and he has a background in public administration, economics, and many years involved in different city agencies. He now manages the district that provides water to more than 3 million people. And since the 1990s, when San Diego area was in a severe drought, the Water Authority diversified their water system through water trades, transfers, conservation, and water reuse. And that was a really big deal when San Diego did that. They reached out, they made this deal with the Imperial farmers for water conservation. But because of this diversification, it's good and bad. The district now has lots of water, but deals with higher water rates for customers, and the customers don't always understand how hard it was to get that water here. So just last week, to reduce those rates, Dan brokered a major water transfer to another Southern California water agency, and that's a pretty big deal. So Dan, fill us in on San Diego.
Thank you, Rita. I have a little bit of an echo. Do I have that? There we go. Thank you for having me. Good to see some of my colleagues online. I want to give all of you just sort of a quick touch point, an overview of the Water Authority, and as Rita teed everything up for me, where we've been and where we're headed. And really, I would say that we're in somewhat of a paradoxical situation at the Water Authority. I'm having trouble moving my slides, so let me readjust here. Hope you all can see that. Rita, are we good?
Yeah, looks good, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So just again, sorry for that little delay. Just to reorientate you with who the Water Authority is. On the slides that JB showed, the Metropolitan Water District, we are part of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. I'm in fact a board member on the Met Board. I represent San Diego along with 3 of my colleagues. But this is our service area. This is the 22 member agencies that we have. We were created in 1944. So we are not going to show up on your water bill. We are a wholesale water provider. We obtain our water through a variety of sources that I'll get into in a minute here, but nonetheless, this is the structure we have. And with these 22 member agencies, we have quite a unique governance structure. Our governance structure resembles that of Metropolitan. It's very similar, created by the legislature, the California legislature, in the same way, which is based on a voting percentage tied to investments in the system and purchases of water. So intuitively, the city of San Diego is our largest customer, while smaller, more rural districts like Uema in North County or even Lakeside in East County have a smaller proportional share of the overall voting structure at the San Diego County Water Authority. The city of San Diego's vote share is about 43% of the total for any action that we take. So just kind of going forward in terms of how do we get to this place? Well, some of you may remember the drought of the 90s, and I think that was, well, it was our wake-up call. These were the headlines. These are headlines that you don't see any longer. But nonetheless, it's what prompted us to reach out to our neighbors to the east in the Imperial Irrigation District and the Coachella Valley Water District and start talking about what is still today the largest agricultural to urban water transfer and water conserved through the lining of earthen canals in the Imperial and Coachella Valleys. We did that because at that point in time in the 90s, we were 95% dependent on the Metropolitan Water District. So what we were facing was a severe drought, and as the headlines show, potentially a 50% curtailment in our supplies. Oddly enough, what started off as a 500,000 acre foot transfer, at least discussions around that number, had been whittled down over several years to get to a firm amount of 200,000 acre feet worth of water based in efficiency, farming practices in the Imperial Valley, and like I mentioned before, concrete lining of the All-American and Coachella canals for another nearly 80,000 acre feet worth of water. This, of course, is not the first drought that San Diego has had. It has not been the last drought. Certainly, we've experienced several over the past 20 years. Notably, in about 2012, I think it was 2013, we doubled down, and we doubled down with the pipes that are behind me, and that's the Carlsbad desal plant. With that plant, it was over $1 billion, and as many in the region will attest to, it is the most expensive water that San Diegans have. It is probably twice the cost, if not 3 times the cost, as some of the other sources that we have, but arguably it is drought proof and it's on tap for us when we need it. Heading into our diversification efforts, you see the chart there from the 90s, where we were at in 2023. So our resource mix is quite diverse. What you see in the blue and the red, those are our Colorado River supplies. Like I've been mentioning, the conserved water transfer with the Imperial Valley, and then the conserved water from the canal lining projects. We buy a small amount of water from Metropolitan in 2026. That 14% that you see there, this slide is outdated, is very close to zero at this point. Recycled water remains a big piece of the pie, and of course the desal water and other sources of conserved water. But heading into the future, I think that what you all hear, at least here locally in San Diego, is that the city of San Diego, some of our East County agencies, and the city of Oceanside are moving towards water reuse. That is the paradoxical situation that is causing San Diego to be a very unique player on the river. But it's not just that local water supply development that's bringing more water in and causing a surplus. Really, what's happened in San Diego is that population growth has slowed. So much so that what we are projecting alongside our partners at Sandag is that population growth in the region will be relatively flat over at least the next decade, if not longer. When you take that with what I believe is a hardwired conservation ethic by San Diegans, I don't think that we're ever going to rebound at this point, or at least not anytime soon, not in the next decade. arguably the next 15 years. And so this kind of tees up what Rita was alluding to with what do we do as a not even a contractor on the river. We are unique. We are a one-off because of this agreement that we do have with the Imperial Irrigation District. So how do we rebalance this resource mix that's in front of you? Well, what we're attempting to do, and as alluded to last week, we were able to enter into a 20-year agreement to exchange water with a portion of Riverside County. This is water that has been conserved through the canal lining projects, through the transfer of the QSA in general, but it largely represents a surplus of water from the entire resource mix there that you see on the screen. Moving forward, the Water Authority, although not directly at the table, we are part of the Colorado River Board of California, and Mr. Hamby represents us well. And so what we're looking to do is provide what we can, any options, try to think creatively out of the box on how we can move some of this water within California to our neighbors to the north, while keeping California whole, and perhaps even exploring what a legal framework looks like for exchanges with other states, that being Arizona and Nevada in the lower basin. We're looking to make some progress on that effort in the coming year, and I think that it would fit nicely into the 2026 guidelines negotiations. We do have the Carlsbad desal plant as a source of that supply. We have the ability, it's a 56,000 acre foot plant. We're probably at a third of that capacity right now, and we do have the ability to expand it by an additional 6,000 or 8,000 acre feet. So a lot of options for us in terms of rebalancing this resource mix. But I say all of that because it's almost reached an existential crisis, I believe, as many of you will probably agree with where your water bills are going. I know that there's rate fatigue. And so any ability that we have to carve out a piece of this pie to provide some ratepayer relief, that's really what we're looking to do. And I believe that we have the ability to do that without compromising any of the agreements that we have with the Imperial or Coachella Valleys or our other partners on the Colorado River, and not compromising by the least bit any of the reliability that we have here in San Diego. With some of these exchanges that we're looking at, if they're successful, it still means that the Water Authority, and this was confirmed in our most recent urban water management plan, that by rebalancing this resource mix, San Diegans should never face a curtailment in water the way that we have in the past, in the 90s out through 2050. I'll stop there, but I do want to make sure that you see my Steve Breen cartoon. It does represent what I just described. It's local water. It's water purchased from Metropolitan. It's the desal plant. The Colorado River water represents what I've been talking most about in the agreements with the Imperial Valley and Coachella Valley. And of course, Pure Water San Diego, whether that's the San Diego Reuse Project, the East County Project, or the Oceanside Project. That's new water coming online as soon as next year, which adds to the independence and the reliability that we have in San Diego. So I'll stop there and leave some time for questions, Rita.
Thank you. San Diego has certainly faced challenges over the years, and they really responded to them and should be sitting in a good picture, which they are. But the rates are something the public, it's hard for them to understand. The problems of water come at a price, and you've got the water for them. And as the old Governor Brown used to tell me when I was a young reporter, Rita, water with problems is better than no water at all. So you got the water anyway. So let's go into a few questions. Anne is looking at some questions, and now what do I do to see them here? But I'll ask the first one. The public always asks us, and maybe some of your neighbors do you, well, why can't we just do more desal? Dan alluded to the fact that it's very expensive, but there have been things in the news recently. There's a project called Blue Ribbon, which is talking about $40 billion, 8 power plants by nuclear power in the Gulf of California. I mean, is this great thinking out of the box, or is this just crazy? Where it takes us away maybe from solving the real problems, but do we need to think big? Anybody thoughts on desal, which could make trades and transfers for the other states?
Well, since I'm the one with the pipes in the background, I'll jump in. I don't think it's crazy, but it's also not necessary to have desalination plants up and down the coast. Rita, I think is, as you mentioned, it's capital intensive. It's a significant investment. And if there have been any lessons learned from the San Diego County Water Authority, it's that your projects have to be planned methodically. There's a project right now that the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is considering, which is Pure Water Southern California, that is a multi-billion-dollar project. Now we're talking about water, maybe 150,000 acre feet, but there's not necessarily a need for it right now. And so I think that what I want to end with this comment is ratepayer fatigue is real, as we've talked about today, and as you mentioned. And so bringing these things on in a methodical way is probably the best approach. Good old conservation works, but I think that there perhaps is not much left in the sponge to squeeze out. And so what this gets to is, how do we work within the resources that we have? And I think that some of these exchanges that we've been talking about evidence that. I would also say that other entities, whether that's the Upper Basin or even within California, perhaps may need to spend a little bit of money. And the Water Authority has certainly done that. You see the consequences of spending that money, but all the cheap water is gone. And I believe that we could use some help from the federal government in some form. That's what helped kickstart the QSA with federal and state funding. So this carrot and stick approach as it relates to funding probably is something we need to be talking a little bit more about.
I do want to take a stab at adding a little context there, if you don't mind, Rita.
Sure.
One thing that I think is really important to know when we're talking about the Colorado River is that we are not going to run out of water, at least not anytime soon. The current situation on the Colorado River does not mean that we are going to see the end of life in the West, but we are going to see the end of life as we know it. There are going to be big changes to how we use water. And I think a big piece that kind of looms in the background of this conversation about should we invest more in desalination or some of these other methods that we have to tweak the supply side a little bit is the fact that there is enough water to sustain life in a lot of ways here, but it means that some of the uses are going to have to change. One of the big things is that agriculture uses the vast majority of water from the Colorado River. Now, we can't suddenly go and say, well, let's just, tweak that equation so more people in cities have the water than agriculture, but the water is there. And so there are ways to go and change where and how that water is used. And one of the biggest ones is by paying farmers to stop using it to grow their crops and bringing that water instead into places with higher population density. There's a lot of big questions about whether that is necessarily a good idea. It's bad for the economies of certain agricultural areas. It might mean changes to the identity of regions of the country that have long depended on growing crops. But we know that there is a lot of water available if places that want it badly enough are willing to pay for it. And so one of the reasons that we have not seen greater use of desalination is because so far, in a lot of instances, it is cheaper to go and free up that money from farmers using the same money that you might have put towards desalination in the first place. It's not going to last forever. It's still fairly expensive and it's politically fraught. But the reason that we haven't seen technologies like desalination ramped up at a massive scale is because there are other and oftentimes more affordable ways to get water that are also in the mix.
Well, obviously, the last administration decided to pay farmers in the Imperial Valley, and we can go to you, JB, to not grow and to conserve water, and that is an option. We are often told, that a lot of this water goes for alfalfa to feed beef, and we know that beef takes a lot of water to produce. It takes 1,200 gallons to produce a steak by the time the cow grows, etc. Are we, if we became vegetarians, would there be more water available? Again, we are talking about changing communities that traditionally farmed, and we've depended on that. And we don't want all our food to come from overseas. I'll let you hang in here with that, JB.
Sure thing. I think, as you alluded to earlier, particularly within the case of an Imperial Valley, and if there is similar interest across the basin, we can do a heck of a lot. And if there were similar efforts as there have been in the San Diego County Water Authority to fund and partner and work to free up additional supplies, we'd be in a very much different and more productive place in the basin than we find ourselves now. There's been the occasional account over the past few years to try and villainize one area or another, or one particular crop or another. But just speaking on that as an example, as I go through my local Smart and Final and pull things off of the shelves, I can tell you that I do enjoy an occasional steak. I don't have it at home. But when I go to the store, I do get some milk for my cappuccino I make at home, and I pull off of the shelf some Greek yogurt that is also an alfalfa product, and some cheese as well, which as well is something that is an alfalfa derivative. So certainly that is something that the Imperial Valley produces of, in addition to growing peppers and lemons and actual cattle here as well, and lettuce and kale and broccoli and all the other stuff that gets grown here. And the same in the Yuma Valley. And what we know for sure is that in the case of our communities here in California, in the Palo Verde Valley, Imperial, Bard, Quetzalcoatl areas, and Coachella, as well as our friends across the river in the Yuma area, these are some of the most productive agricultural regions in the country that are producing 365 days of the year, when much of the rest of the country is blanketed in snow. It's a pleasant and delightful 80 degrees, and we're harvesting some great carrots and alfalfa and other things at this time of year. So there's great efficiency with the amount that's produced in our communities all throughout the year. Also, to the discussion about, and building on Alex's earlier, your comments there's great opportunity when there's a willingness, there's a way to generate water and to make things happen. Another cartoon that we don't have up here on the screen is sort of where we were just a few short years ago when I started this gig in early 2023. It was all of the states at each other's throats, in particular the other six versus California. That was a very unpleasant thing to enter into. But ultimately, what we're able to do at that time is partner together within California, partner with our lower basin colleagues in Arizona and Nevada, and with our federal friends as well, to pull together the largest ever conservation deal in American history. And we originally set a moonshot goal target of 3 million acre feet, which by the end of this year, we're going to exceed by 700,000 acre feet. That's more than double what Nevada is entitled to on an annual basis. And not only that, we will have accomplished our 3 million acre foot goal a whole year early. So that involved massive participation from our urban friends throughout the basin, Metropolitan, the Central Arizona Project, Southern Nevada Water Authority, agricultural users in the Imperial Valley within the CAP service area, and others in Southern California. So big things are possible when there's a willingness.
Could you tell us, JB, about how much in the last couple of years has been paid to the district and farmers to do this great conservation? Do you have a number for that at all?
No number comes to mind in terms of the dollars, but I can speak in terms of the results, which is since 2003, since the partnerships began with San Diego, Met, and others. And in addition, with these more recent conservation efforts, it's been over 9 million acre feet of Colorado River
Yeah.
water.
I know it's a significant number. It's a fair number that they've been given, but let's go over to Arizona real quick. There's a question here about water availability affecting development in Arizona. We see how much Arizona's growing urban. Are the planning boards restricting development at all in Arizona? I know you're looking at big AI development, and I've read that one 100-word search on ChatGPT takes one bottle of water. So we're really looking at water. Since you're not providing for agriculture, can you speak to development for water? Are you going to be getting it from the Indian tribes too? Give us a little rundown there.
Sure, absolutely, Rita. I'm happy to answer that. So one thing we have to remember is the state of Arizona has had something called a Groundwater Management Act since the 1980s. Are you able to hear me fine?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we have had an act called the 1980s Groundwater Management Act. And that was put in place so as to enable the state of Arizona to bring the Central Arizona Project Canal into central and southern Arizona because there was a lot of groundwater pumping. As a result of the Groundwater Management Act, we have a few regulations. Like I mentioned during my presentation, any development that is occurring within those three AMAs, and remember, those three active management areas are part of the Groundwater Management Act. This is where Central Arizona Project serves. If you are located within those three active management areas, no matter what you do, you have to have assured water supply certificates from a water provider or an adequate water supply certificate, which essentially means if you're using groundwater, it has to be replenished by you or by an agency called the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So we have a lot of checks and balances in place. Those entities that get those 100-year assured water supply certificates, they usually have a portfolio, which essentially is similar to the pie chart that I showed you, which has Colorado River supplies, groundwater, reclaimed water, as well as surface water supplies. And Dan Denham's pie chart was excellent because what he's pointing out to is when you have a more diverse portfolio, like how we invest in different things, is probably better for our city. So I do want to plug in. We support desalination, we support collaboration with our neighboring states. But coming back to our state, we as a state, not only do we have to provide those certificates, we have those entities come back to us every 10 years and update those certificates. So we are constantly looking at them. We have a model, which is looking at the groundwater model. And every time somebody comes in to renew their certificates, or when someone applies for a new assured water supply, we look at that model. If you remember back 3 years ago, there was a news across the entire country which said Phoenix is running out of water. And that was because our model showed that there would be 4.7 million acre feet of deficit across 100 years in the fringe areas who were applying for a certificate. So we are looking at it constantly. So when you come to see results like that from our model, what the state does is we do not assure or we do not issue those assured water supply certificates to any new areas. I also showed you my flow chart or the bar chart where some water uses, the NIA priority within our bar chart, within our CAP, no longer is receiving water from the last 5 years. And if we take that additional reduction that the lower basin states agreed to, more entities are going to get cut out. So if somebody were to come in for an assured water supply certificate right now, and if they have that NIA allocation, that is no longer a supply that they can rely on. So we have a lot of checks in place.
Okay.
Vanessa, does that mean then that the AI data center that's being proposed for Imperial County went there because they couldn't go to Phoenix? Is that what that means?
Thank you, Anne. I don't think I can speak to the business decisions that entities make, but we do have the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing industry right here. They just approved Fab 2 in the Phoenix area. It is extremely important for national security because we are looking at China versus Taiwan and so on. So we also have Intel, who is another chip manufacturing. We have a whole lot of data centers. So the business decisions that they make is probably not just based on water. It's based on a whole bunch of things. But we already have two massive chip manufacturers that are extremely important to the country's national security. And they're located here. They just approved the second fabrication plant 3 weeks ago. So if TSMC agrees to that, we have water, City of Phoenix is able to provide, and we are very much regulated and controlled by best management practices. We have the most stringent regulations on groundwater use within the entire country.
Thank you.
Okay, there are a number of questions about water rights, which is hard for sometimes folks to understand how strong these are sometimes. The compact, it's always been that it would be easier to work around the compact than change the compact. Behind the scenes, are there any discussions about going into the future? You know, we're still with this 1922 agreement. Well, all of you are at the table, so chime in.
So, as much disagreement about the compact that there is, as voraciously as people have thoughts and ideas about them, everyone is committed to the compact, no matter what state you're in. So it's not a polarizing issue. Whether you're California, Arizona, or Colorado, everyone will very firmly assert that the compact matters and must be respected. Nonetheless, as you mentioned, Rita, over the past 25 years or so, there's sort of been layer after layer of states coming together and developing operating agreements for the river. 2007, the states came together and figured out how to implement shortages in the lower basin, how to come up with more flexible ways to move water from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. 2019, states came back together again, came up with the drought contingency plan to do additional efforts between upper and lower basins and develop additional measures within the lower basin. And there are fundamental differences that Alex alluded to earlier about what the compact means, which has been layered also with the fact that we have really dynamic hydrology in the downward direction that we weren't anticipating, certainly in 1922, when the river we were imagining then was well over 15 million acre feet, and this year it's anything but. So we have collectively thought in the lower basin in particular about creative ways that we can adapt to the hydrology that we have today and try to work together as a basin moving forward. One has been, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead and finish that thought, and then I'd like to ask the other panelists if they agree that we can't somehow junk the 1922 compact, that we have to work around it.
I'll tag Vinitha with our natural flow idea, which is, I think, a great idea about how we do flexible things.
Sure, absolutely happy to do that, JB. So I think JB alluded to this. Compact is sacrosanct, especially for the lower basin water users. So because we have been at a crossroads standstill for the past few years, last year the lower basin states proposed a natural flow concept. Essentially, what we would do is look at the last 3 years of natural flows that are flowing in the river. So when I say natural flows, that means if there was absolutely no development on the Colorado River, there were no reservoirs, what would be the flow in the river if there was no reservoirs, no uses? So reclamation calculates that volume. And if under our natural flow concept, if you were to look at the last 3 years of natural flows, take the average of 3-year flows and then take a percentage of it. Both JB and I alluded to the type of economic productivity, the type of population that is in the lower basin. It is 75%, but we were agreeable given the way the river has been functioning, given the historic low levels in the system, and given the flows that are reducing, we were agreeable to perhaps looking at a percentage that's much lower than 75%. Essentially, what we were asking the Upper Basin states to do is, let's look at those 3 years of natural flows, let's take the average, and let's assign a percentage. So for example, if there was 10 million acre feet of average natural flows, and if we were to get 65%, let's say, Upper Basin states would have to deliver 6.5 million acre from Lake Powell. No questions asked how they get it done. Essentially, you just deliver that 6.5 million acre feet at Lake Powell based on the changing natural flows. This goes to what the Upper Basin states have been asking. Live within the supply of the river. And that was the idea, but it got rejected.
Okay, now go to Alex. Alex, the lower basin really has done a lot of innovative things and spent some money. Is that really happening in the upper basin? I don't see that kind of innovation. What are you seeing?
It's an interesting question. I think generally, depending on what you count as innovation, I would say there has probably been more in the lower basin. Like when we're talking about desalination, when we're talking about large scale efforts to change the way that we have agricultural efficiency. From what I have seen, I would say more money has been spent on that, at least in the last few years in the lower basin. I think, one thing that is kind of a subtext to a lot of the questions that I think people have been asking so far is a difference between what we can do with water and what we should do with water. And right now we have a lot of really smart people working on the question of what we can do with water. And a lot of times I think bigger questions about what we should do with water don't necessarily get asked. And a lot of that is because of the constraints of the compact. So the Colorado River's water does not necessarily get used in a particularly free market way. You know, there's a lot of other resources that get used in this country based on, you know, kind of what is the best use of that resource. And a lot of times the best use of that resource gets decided by who can apply it where to make money. But because the Colorado River's water is allocated by a old legal system that has proven relatively inflexible over the years, we have, you know, vegetables being grown in Southern California with a tremendous amount of water in a way that I think has benefited the country greatly. We have all gotten used to diets where if you live in Buffalo or Minnesota, you can still get a fresh salad in the middle of the winter. However, to stop that quantity of water from being used there, there is not necessarily an easy way to change that. If we decided, I'm not even saying that it is the best idea to stop using the water there, but there's a lot of people who ask questions like, why don't we tone down the amount of water that's being used there? There is not a mechanism within the Colorado River to go and flip that switch overnight because the right to use that water is protected there. In Arizona, there's a lot of really smart people making sure that when developers come in, there is a way for new homes and new businesses to be built in this state with the guarantee that they can have water for 100 years. There are incredibly smart people building systems to reuse water, clean up sewage, and make sure that we can get every last drop in the system again. But that is all happening without a way to get the question of should we be doing that development necessarily like in the process legally. So I think that these are all really fair questions. People oftentimes ask, should we be using the water for new homes in Phoenix? Should we be using the water for alfalfa in California? Those questions are important, but the way that we manage the river and the laws that guide how we use the water don't necessarily allow for those questions to be introduced into the process that we use to figure out what the next policy is going to be.
Okay, you know, there's a question here that comes up once in a while, so I want to bring it up. Is in the newspaper, sometimes you'll see that alfalfa is grown in the Imperial Valley and maybe in Yuma and shipped to Saudi Arabia. I know, Vita, you know about that, JB. What's happening with that? Is it something people should really be concerned of? Farmers have the right to grow and sell what they want, but you know, it's virtual water. We are exporting our water through the food to Saudi Arabia. Is that a big deal or not? JB?
So forage is one of the crops that gets grown here super productively in the Imperial Valley, whereas in the Upper Basin, you have some alfalfa being grown. You can maybe get a couple cuttings of it during the summer months. In the Imperial Valley, you can do so very efficiently and get 10 plus cuttings a year of some very highly productive stuff, great protein content for animals, which are not limited to cows, and includes bales going west on Interstate 8 and going to the San Diego Zoo to feed the giraffes and all the other fun animals there. It goes to other animals northward in the state who, when California is experiencing some really bad droughts in other parts of the state, Imperial Valley is able to help supply that demand to get your real California milk continuing to flow as well. Certainly some gets exported. We have a global economy. It's a relatively small share of it. But certainly what we have going on here in the Imperial Valley is productive and efficient year-round agriculture. And that's certainly one of the things that gets grown.
So
And
Rita, let me ask
yeah, I
another
was going to
question.
ask if you had anything to.
I think that we should mention the water deal that the Water Authority made with Western Water District last week. Is that what we're going to be doing in the future? Are we going to be seeing where the water is available being sold to where it's needed, traded around depending on what the situation is in each of those individual areas? What do you think, Dan?
Well, you know, it kind of gets back to some of the themes that we've talked about willing buyers and willing sellers and paying market-based price for water. I candidly would like to see more of that. You know, it is what has worked between San Diego and the Imperial Valley for the past 20 years. It is something that has sustained agriculture, as JB has described, and it's candidly sustained the urban coast, the way of life that we live here in San Diego. And it's not cheap, and we knew it wasn't cheap, but it was an act in the 90s that we knew we had to do. And so with Western in particular, they were willing to do 20 years later what we did back in 2003. And so the extent to which more of that occurs and everyone is made whole and it's better water resource management, then yeah, I would hope to see some more of that.
Now, I know we're running out of time, but should people be concerned that if we have extended drought and climate change, and we're looking at a worst case scenario where the water, Mother Nature doesn't send it to the Upper Basin, and they physically can't send it. We may have the water rights down here, but if they physically can't send it, is that an extreme scenario, or is that something that the public should consider? All of you.
I'll go first. So this year is absolutely horrendous. We have 58% snowpack. We haven't seen snowpack like that ever. Not in my lifetime, not in the historic records that I've seen. It's pretty bad, which means the inflow, the flow that is going into the reservoirs is going to be horrible. And we are going to have to take some drastic measures. And as JB mentioned, we are also on the verge of compact compliance next year and even this year. If power releases were to be reduced this year, we would be in compact compliance. That means if that compact compliance is breached and if there's no agreement between the 7 basin states, there certainly could be some litigation. Somebody might ask to change that. So I would say it is not a drastic, not ever happening scenario. We are observing it right now. And we were going from the early 1900s where we had 16 million acre feet flow to somewhere here where we are getting 4, 8, 9 million acre feet of flow. So that's a lot of that is supply that's coming down. I want to go back to something that Alex was saying, Dan was saying, JB was saying, and also want to go back, harken back to something that I said. We cannot control drought. The only thing we can control is one, reduce our uses and also increase supplies that can come from drought proof like recycling and also desalination. I'll stop there and turn it on to maybe JB.
Sure, those are great. Anybody else want to chime in on that drastic scenario that the public should really worry about, not getting the water?
Water is important. There's less of it around. We all need to do our part. That includes everyone.
It does. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think, like I said, we don't have to worry about a day zero anytime soon. Realistically, you are not going to turn on your tap and nothing's going to come out. That's not going to happen soon. But we are seeing big problems on the river that mean that could happen decades from now if we don't make smart decisions today. We built not only a system of water use, like the homes and farms that use the water, but a system of water management that requires a certain amount of water to be there. And the big problem we're seeing right now is that the dams that hold back our big reservoirs, they will not be able to pass water from one side to the other if water gets much lower, because we never imagined that the river would get this low when we built them decades and decades ago. We can't just go in there and change those dams overnight. The way that we get out of this problem is by making decisions about how we use water. And that decision has to be using less across the board. And right now, our best hope for doing that is through those negotiations. So far, from what I have heard, again, one of the other panelists is on the inside of those rooms, but from the outside looking in, from what I have heard, is the states are not really looking at a sweeping long-term strategy to reduce water use. What we are most likely to see, if anything at all, is a shorter-term plan that allows the states to have a few more years to make sure that water does flow through those dams, and then talk again about coming up with some bigger, longer-term reductions. But right now, all of the energy is focused on those negotiations because that is our best hope for coming up with those big region-wide demand reductions that everybody agrees are the best way to avoid big problems.
Do those of you at the table agree that we'd be lucky if we just get a couple years of agreement and then have to keep fighting this thing. Is that what you see, Vintha and JB?
Well, I would say that when we first started this process back in 2023, I remember sending an email out, and I think Vinitha replied at the time. We were in fervent agreement. We needed to resolve the structural deficit problem. And then we were so filled with enthusiasm about solving big problems we were trying to solve at that time for maybe a 30-year period, up to 4 million acre feet a year of potential reductions. What you've seen more lately, and as Alex has alluded to, this vast decline in terms of the ambition of what we're trying to solve for and achieve as the negotiations have dragged on over the years. And we've just tried to go from those levels in terms of volume and duration down to maybe can we get something for 5 years? And then more recently, can we get something for this year and next year, to now, can we even get an agreement on how this river should be operated for this year based on how horrible the hydrology is this year and what are the actions necessary? So where there's a willingness to be able to compromise and work together, there's great things that we can achieve. That's certainly where we in California and our partners in Arizona started this process out just 3 short years ago. But there's more than just us. There's 7 states in the basin, also federal partners, and it takes all of us to get to something.
I would like to say a worse scenario than having a really bad hydrology and not having a 7 states agreement is having a really bad hydrology and being in court. So what the 7 states are trying to do right now, it's not that we don't agree, we need a long-term plan. We absolutely, like JB said, when California, Nevada, and Arizona started to work on together, we came up with a perfect plan. We were willing to put on the table up to 4 million acre feet reductions, but Upper Basin states must share with us. We cannot be taking reductions from something from a future, but the current consumption to you. So what I want to say is that we're looking at a short-term plan just to give us enough time to get our act together where we can agree on more certain terms for the 20 years. So it's not an escape.
All right. Maybe we need the spirit of Herbert Hoover to lock everybody in that room like at the Bishop's Lodge and not let them out for food and water till we get a deal. But I know I can see, I think our audience can see that the people who cover this issue, like Alex, and the people who are involved in it, like the rest of our panelists, really care about solving this problem. They're not in this for the money, they're in this for what they believe in. And I really appreciate everybody being with us tonight, especially want to thank the League of Women Voters for their putting this panel together. The League works hard with their water committee to do the research. Anne, do you want to throw in another word here?
No, thank you so much. You've all been just wonderful speakers tonight. I think that everyone's learned a whole lot. And if we didn't appreciate the water before, we certainly do now.
And we do
Thank
have
you.
this recorded that will be, I'll be sending you the link with this so that you can send it on to folks who actually just had dinner and had a quiet night and didn't join us on the Water World.
The video will be available on both the League's websites. Thank you very much. It's
Thank
much
you all so
appreciated.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.